What's up, guys? Justin here with Elite Self, coming to you with part 2 of the Psycho-Cybernetics themed 21-day challenge. Very excited about this, finally able to share my thoughts on this book and experience this journey with you guys as well. If you did not already see part 1, definitely go back and check that out. Lots of important stuff in there setting the foundation for what we're going to be going over today. And if you've not already picked up a copy of the book Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz, I highly encourage you to do that. It's a very personal read. He really tailors it to you, so you get to interpret what is most important to you. So the stuff that I go over in these videos may not be the same stuff that would stick out the most to you if you were to read the book. So I highly encourage you to check that out as well. Again, we set a lot of foundations in the last video, so we don't need as much explanation going in. We're just going to jump right into chapter 2 right now. So the first thing that he goes over in chapter 2 is this, the idea of, like, you have to set your sights. You have to figure out what your goals are. And he says there's two particular types of goals that are really important, or two ideas of types of goals that you can focus on. And the first is going to be something you can have or do. It's something that you know, you've seen it, already exists, it can be done or it can be had, and you want that also, right? So that's type 1. The second type would be discovering something that you know is there but may seem to be missing, right? So like a missing puzzle piece. So you want to figure out what your goals are, figure out what kind of goal it is, and then start moving in that direction. One of the biggest things that he talks about in this chapter and in the next chapter as well is that planning or talking about or all these kinds of things are always to stop you from achieving that goal. Start moving in that direction and stop thinking about it, right? And if you can't actually take action in that direction, stop thinking about it anyway, which leads me to point number 2. Most of the points that I'm about to bring up are pretty well summarized in a quote that he brings out, Maxwell Maltz brings out from Brian Tracy into the book that says, "In workings of the mind, effort defeats itself." Again, that is from Brian Tracy. What he means by that is essentially when you're thinking really hard about solving a problem, you're actually slowing down the problem-solving process. And the reason is the conscious mind, the part of the brain that you control deliberately, is really designed for 3 things. Okay? The first is going to be observing information, interpreting information, and making decisions based on that information, right? That's really what this part of your brain, wherever it is, wherever the conscious mind, that's what it's for, right? The subconscious is your creative thinking problem solver, right? That's what it's for. It's designed to solve problems. Now, your conscious mind is not designed to solve problems. Your subconscious is. Now, if that's the case, then why are all of us beating our heads against the wall all the time, thinking really hard about solving problems and not making any progress? Because we're control freaks. We don't want to relinquish it, and plus it's really hard. It takes a lot of practice to take something that you're worried about, like let's say you got a problem at work and you got a deadline coming up. It takes a lot of practice and a lot of discipline to say, I'm not going to worry about that right now, right? That's hard to do. Now, let's take a look at, this happens in movies all the time. It happens in stories and books and even in real life, and it's probably happened to you as well, where you got some kind of problem that you're actively trying to solve. You're like, I've got to fix this. You're beating your head against the wall. You can't get to the bottom of it, and then you sit back and you go, oh, this is ridiculous, or however you needed to take a break from it. And in all the movies, and all the books, and all the stories about the great CEOs and inventors and things like that, whoever had to solve a problem and they were beating their heads against the wall, when did the epiphany happen? When they weren't actively trying to solve the problem. It's when they sat down and they were talking to their friend, complaining about how difficult the problem was to solve, and their friend said something and they went, wait a second, that makes sense, and then they went and solved it, right? Because they weren't actively trying to solve the problem. They gave their conscious mind a break, let the subconscious do its thing, and boom, problem solved, right? So that's something that's really, really important. Instead of trying to consciously and actively solve the problem, discover what the target's going to be. I want this, or I want to do this, or I want to find what's missing in this picture, and then start moving in that direction. Or if it's something you can't start moving in that direction with until you have a solution, be willing to put it off to the side and work on something else so your subconscious can do its thing on this problem. Okay, point being, don't think about it. Let it happen. Okay? The last thing, and this is sort of an extension of that last point, is leave how behind. I'm sure at some point you guys have brought an idea to somebody and they just started grilling you with how questions, right? I want to build a mansion. Okay, how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to build it? How are you going to hire people? How, what? And they start asking all these questions about the actual process, and it's overwhelming. And you start freaking out, and you're a little bit offended because you had this really good idea, and people are ruining it with all these questions, right? That's because that's not what this part of our brain, our conscious mind, is designed to do, right? It's not designed to problem solve. It's designed to set the target and let the subconscious do the problem solving, right? So anytime you're consciously thinking about how, you're actually limiting the progress that can be made and extending the time it's going to take for that progress to be made. So instead of worrying about how something's going to get done, decide you want to do it. If you can take action now, take action now. If you can't, be willing to wait and work on something else, okay? So those are my big notes from chapter 2. We're also going to include my notes from chapter 3, which was really just one point, but it's a very, very big point. And it's interesting to me because, in case you guys didn't know, I'm a ninja instructor. I teach people to do stuff like ninja obstacles and things like that. And one of the things I've been telling my students for years is visualize success, right? Not just the after the fact, but visualize you going through the process. Visualize you attempting the skill. Visualize you getting up the warp wall. And visualize it in such vivid detail that you actually feel it in your body. And the reason that happens, and I didn't know about this until I read this book, but the reason that happens and why that works is that your brain cannot actually tell the difference between what is actually happening in real life and a vividly imagined experience. They're the same thing to your brain. So you guys have probably experienced this at some point too, like when you're watching football or whatever sport you're into, and you're watching this happen, and somebody does something, and you're moving with them, like, or even you're clenching your fists or whatever. Like, that's because your brain is like, move, your brain's like, yeah, what are you doing? And that's because you're experiencing, you're visualizing that experience of the player on the screen or on the field. So the same rules apply to when you imagine success, or when you imagine the process of success in sports or whatever, or even in your own character. If you are able to visualize yourself being in a position of leadership, or being in a position of, being excessively compassionate, or whatever it is that you want to be, whatever character, we talked about in the previous chapter, redefining our self-image, right? So whatever your best version of yourself, what you want to see, if you can visualize them, the more vivid, the better. Okay, remember, if it's detailed, the more detailed it is, the less your brain is going to be able to figure out, like, wait, this isn't actually happening, right? So visualize yourself in the position you want to be in, whether it's an athletic accomplishment or it's a character development type thing. Visualize that as often as possible and make it as vivid as possible, and that's going to help you start taking steps in that direction. Because your brain, by the time, so like in relation to athletics, let's say you want to run up the 14-foot warp wall, you visualize it in such vivid detail and in such vivid character that you are able to feel it before you even get started. And then your brain already knows what it's supposed to feel like. It's like, dude, run it, lean back, do the thing, get your knees up, you're good, right? So that same thing can be applied to the development of new self-image and the development of new character traits as well. And if you don't believe me, he actually references a study that was mentioned in what I believe is a magazine called Research Quarterly, it was essentially a 20-day study where they had 3 different groups come in and basically shoot basketballs at a hoop and see how many people made it. They sent Group A home and said, don't do anything. Don't practice, don't think about basketball, nothing, right? They sent Group B home, they said practice 20 minutes a day, right? Then they sent Group C home and they said only think about it. Don't practice. Just visualize and imagine shooting the basketball into the hoop, right? Group A comes back, nothing's really different, they didn't do anything, so why would it be? Group B comes back, they have a 24% increase in their accuracy 20 days later. So 20 days of practicing for 20 minutes a day leads to 24% increase in this particular group. Pretty cool, pretty awesome. Group C comes back, the people that only imagined, that only visualized the process, and they have a 23% increase in their accuracy at shooting the basketball. Now, to clarify, that's a 1% difference in accuracy in the people that actively practiced versus the people that only imagined. 1%. That's crazy. So you can get almost the same amount of progress through as people who are practicing day in and day out as by simply visualizing the process. So. And there's lots more studies like this. You can Google them, you can look them all up, but it's pretty cool to see that actually makes sense and that people are actually documenting that kind of stuff now. So those are the big points from chapter 2 and 3. Quick review. You have to set your target. Then you have to let it go. You have to just say, I'm going to do this, and then either move in that direction or wait until you can move in that direction. Right? Don't worry about trying to solve the problem. Let your subconscious do that. He talks about different areas. You know, you can go do something mindless, like data entry if you're, you know, in a position where you have the data entry something you have to do, or you can go if you're working on, you know, a problem and you want to go shoot basketball or whatever. Like even if, and especially if you want to just go to sleep. Like a lot of really highly successful people will write down their problems at the end of the day, or even actually some of them, because they don't want to stimulate the thought process while they're trying to go to sleep. I've read and listened to several of them who will actually write down whatever problem they want to have solved by the next morning prior to dinner. And then if they're eating dinner at 7 and they're going to bed at 10, well, that's 3 hours for them to stop really thinking about the problem, but it's still on the docket for the subconscious. So while while the person's asleep, the subconscious is still doing its thing. They wake up the next day with the problem solved. So there's all sorts of methods that you can use to shut down and change your focus from the problem so you're not beating your head against a wall and actually impeding the process of solving the problem. So set your target, start taking steps in that direction if you can. If you can't, then just put it off to the side, work on something else, or go, you know, twiddle your thumbs for a little while till your problem's solved. And then finally in chapter 3, visualization is key. You have to vividly imagine what it would be like to be the person you want to be in the position you want to be able to do the thing you want to do. That is going to be a huge factor in whether or not you succeed. So those are the big points that I took from chapter 2 and 3. I hope to have another video by Friday going over either chapter 4 or chapters 4 and 5. Anyway, again, pick up a copy of the book, keep following. I want to hear about what you guys are learning and how this stuff is helping you. If you are going through reading Psycho-Cybernetics yourself right now, please share what you're learning. I'm really curious to learn what were the big things that stuck out to everybody else. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys later on this week. Stay elite.